good evening, and welcome to this month's edition of The Edge. As always, I'm your host, Trevor Lewington. Every month on the third Thursday, we're talking to community and business leaders, getting their advice, their insights on how to build community, how to build your business, and sometimes how to build your life. Now, whether you came here through YouTube or Roku TV or SSH 101 TV or Fire TV or Apple TV, look, at the end of the day, we don't care how you got here. We're just really glad you're joining us this evening. And tonight, I'm very privileged to have the Honorable Nathan Neudorf with us, Alberta's Minister of Affordability and Utilities, back on the show.
Great to be here. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, 2 years, I think.
Yeah. So, it's fun to be back and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Now, obviously, Christmas, you survived, you're back to work. I'm curious, I think about my December and the number of invites I get to different functions and events. What the heck does your December look like? How many community events are you invited to every month?
A lot. Very, very, very busy schedule. Obviously, we sat until end of the first week of December, I think, and then
so you're in Edmonton, in the legislature.
All the things, receptions in the evenings, and when you're not doing evening sittings and all that kind of stuff as well. And then we get back trying to wrap up. I was here and in Calgary, 7, 8, 9 different meetings a day typically, and then normally 4 or 5 events in the evening. Some nights there's 2, 3 events to go to, and it's just a absolute sprint to the holiday break. And you hope you can close the door, turn the lights off, and just bury yourself in a bed or in a book or something like that for about a week, which I did get some time away with family. It was nice.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I just think, a lot of people don't realize the hours that go into the job. There's always this, well, the House only sits for X days per year, but that's really the very smallest part of the job in my mind.
It really is. It really is. There's a huge balance. When you're an MLA, obviously you're meeting with constituents and doing case files, meeting stakeholders, talking to municipalities, and in Lethbridge, the university, the Polytechnic, the school divisions, just tons and tons of meetings. And then events. Everybody has AGMs. Everybody has annual fundraisers or different societies are wanting to recognize individuals. And it's important to be there. And most holidays are working days for us. So it can often be 7 days a week and a lot of hours. And I'm glad they don't calculate your paychecks by the hour, because it's a pretty small number.
Yeah, that would not be a good thing. So, I mean, interesting to me that, you're the MLA, the member of the Legislative Assembly for Lethbridge-East. So for folks that are watching us from around the world on the different platforms, an elected representative at the provincial level for half of the city.
That's true.
We're divided into 2 ridings.
Yes.
You're Minister of Affordability and Utilities, so you have an executive branch portfolio.
Yes.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
And then there's this other thing. You're the Vice Chair of Treasury Board.
Mm-hmm.
So that's layered on top.
That is, yes.
And so what the heck is that?
Well, in the government, provincial government, every expenditure by the government in any ministry, even the Premier's portfolio as intergovernmental relations, those numbers have to be approved by Treasury Board, so we can manage our budget, manage our funding. As Vice Chair, I do hold some sway. I chair meetings when the Chair or the Minister of Finance is not there, which is rare. He's pretty diligent, pretty dedicated, does a ton of work. And if you think it's hard doing your household budget, just try doing about a $74 billion budget for the province. That's a lot of approvals and denials. And
so every expense in that $74 billion budget goes through Treasury.
Every single one.
Wow.
And every adjustment. And there's quarterly reports and updates where something came in under budget, something came over budget, something needs to be reprofiled because the spend couldn't be spent on time for whatever reason. Sometimes it has to be reconciled with different funding or matching funding from the federal government, all those kind of things. So a lot of work on that file. And of course, at this time of year, just leading into Christmas and just after Christmas, is the next year's budget deliberations. Every ministry has to come through with their mandated targets from the Premier.
Wow.
And we have to work through yes, no on all those kind of things and account for all of the new public sector contract agreements that have been agreed to and how that incorporates into those funding. What's happening with the price of oil, which I'm sure many people are watching globally.
Has a bit of an impact on the budget.
A little impact.
A couple of adjustments.
So roughly, for every dollar change on West Texas Intermediate, the price of oil, that's sort of like the base mark for global. Everything's compared to West Texas Intermediate, WTI. For every dollar change, that's a $750 million change to the government of Alberta. So last year, budget, or 2 years ago, we were estimating about $72 a barrel, barrel of oil, WTI. Right now we're flirting with $60 a barrel, so we're down $12 a barrel. So 12 times 750 million.
That's lots of billions.
That's lots of billions. That's tough. And it's not just that. It's the price of oil. It's the differential price between West Texas Intermediate and Western Canadian Select, which is what we
actually get and what we can get on the market.
Exactly. So there's that differential, which also has a thing, and it's the exchange rate between the Canadian dollar and the U.S. dollar. So all three of those factors, like 1 cent, can make a big difference in terms of the dollars per barrel. So yeah, this is what Treasury Board did. A lot of work, a lot of meetings this week alone. We had 3 afternoon meetings for 3.5 hours each day, just going through stuff again and finalizing our work on the budget. And yeah, we've got to do operations and capital management and grants and reconciliation of all of these factors.
So speaking of grants, I don't want to derail us too early, too fast, but it's very timely. I mean, there's a fairly significant piece of infrastructure in Calgary that's gotten a lot of attention. I would imagine
Yes.
Capital budgets, capital planning, how municipalities are funded. I mean, in all fairness, as a recovering politician, a former municipal official, it was challenging to use the capital dollars we were given to address the infrastructure issues. But the Bears Paw line, Calgary seems to have a fairly significant challenge. Is that a Treasury Board level discussion? Like, how does that?
Yes and no. That is it's a municipal utility and it's a municipal responsibility, and they, as the city of Calgary, charge their ratepayers for that water utility. That's meant to provide for the operations and maintenance and upgrades. Now, capital maintenance and renewal, very non-sexy line in anybody's government, any government's budget.
Yeah, no one's raving about that.
Nobody's raving about that. But as a former carpenter, general contractor, all of those kind of things, I am adamant to advocate for strong funding capital maintenance renewal. In fact, I advocated this time around for a doubling of that. This happened before the water main break in Calgary, because again, aging infrastructure costs a lot of dollars to fix. Now, it's every politician's dream to cut a ribbon on a new building, a new school, a new hospital, new whatever.
That's sexy. It's exciting.
You get a lot
media.
of yeah, we're doing the work. You don't, when you replace like the HVAC system at the U of L, which I was an MLA last term, advocated for that, $27 million or something of that nature to replace that HVAC. Nobody ever saw it. But no heat in a university building in the winter is going to be a big problem. Same with when these things go, it's really big. So really making sure that good, responsible governance is taking care of the assets you already have and making sure capital maintenance and renewal funding is there. We can't say yes to every project. We just don't have the funding for that. But we can certainly make sure that there's a robust fund to take care of the assets we already have. So very proud that strongly advocated and Treasury Board agreed with me, and the Minister of Finance also advocated for strong capital maintenance and renewal budget to make sure that the provincial assets are being taken care of. Maintenance, we could probably do more. You could always do more, but yeah, we've got a robust fund for that.
So essentially, you're saying you got them to double the pot.
Double the pot of what was there. So that's
a good start.
That's a good start. Like, I think if we were trying to capture every single project that's on the capital maintenance, I think we need to do 10 times. That wasn't going to happen.
Right.
But at least not cutting it, at least not deferring it, at least saying we're taking a step in the right direction to do as much as we can and maybe even a little bit more. Healthy place to start.
Okay. So, Treasury Board meetings, ministerial meetings, you're in Edmonton a fair bit. How often, I've seen some international travel, some domestic travel. You're often advocating for different policies, advocating for Alberta at the federal level. Yeah. Like, how often are you on the road traveling, and where do you go?
Yeah, a lot. If you talk to my wife, it's probably a bigger number than I'm going to tell you. It's honestly, it's probably about 50-50. I might even travel a little bit more than 50%.
Okay.
So yes, Edmonton, Calgary quite often, as a lot of stakeholders for my file are in Calgary. And then of course trips, we have what's called federal, provincial, territorial meetings, FTP or FPTs. And that can be hosted by any one of the provinces or territories. So those happen a couple of times a year. There have been times recently where I've had to go to Washington, D.C. As you know, there's a few conversations we had with those counterparts.
I would imagine that's an active discussion. Yeah.
Active discussion, so sometimes you can get lost in a very big political city. I've been to Helena in Montana, the capital of Montana, as a huge trading partner for Alberta to address certain tensions and issues there. And then sometimes there's further trips abroad. I have gone to California, Texas, Oklahoma as very strong models for electricity and my file. California has got some very progressive ideas, some good, some maybe less good. Texas is an open market similar to ours. Oklahoma is a bit of a blend of the two. I've had the opportunity to travel to London to represent Alberta's energy in terms of the nuclear file, to talk to the UK as a very trusted partner and speak on behalf of Canada with counterparts from Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick for Canada Day in Canada Place, right on Trafalgar Square. So that was a very proud moment, and how proud a history Canada has in the UK, and a very, very strong partner there. So a lot of things related to the file in very meaningful ways to make sure that we have strong pathways to investment, strong trade relationships, and strong policy that gets us on board, not just within Canada, but with very significant trade partners, so that all our eggs aren't only in one basket, which I think can be a challenge for us at times with such a huge trading partner. So
yeah, something we've learned certainly over the last year or so, that we have to be thinking about diversification. And
exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, there's the travel, there's the meetings, and then you actually have a real job locally to represent your constituents. How do you carve out the time? Like, how does that work to work on constituent concerns and be visible here in Lethbridge?
It is challenging. Now I make it a priority. I try to do a balance of meeting individual constituents with their challenges, questions, concerns, as well as stakeholder groups. Obviously, I've mentioned the university and the Polytechnic, but we've got school divisions. We have the city, obviously. We've got Chinook Regional Hospital and its affiliate or related boards, the cardiac cath lab and the cardiac
big group. Exciting project.
Big exciting project. So there's all of these that you try to balance. Now I've always taken the approach that obviously I can't do it all myself. So I've chosen to staff my office in Lethbridge with 3 part-time individuals, each doing significant roles, and they do a tremendous amount of work when I can't.
Okay.
And some offices, they have, some of our rural ridings have a different challenge. Very large geographies, somewhat slightly smaller population. So do they have 3 offices with part-time people in each, or they're only open on certain days when they're there? Different challenges. I've got a small office. I've got a geographically smaller riding, higher number of people. So I've got people there. I've got a young lady that comes in and works tremendously hard on correspondence. I've got a full-time casework individual in my office. She helps people with individual cases with provincial portfolio files, whether it's AISH funding or a healthcare concern, educational concern, sometimes a bit of an provincially immigration related question.
So if I'm an individual with a specific concern about my AISH benefits, I could come to your office to get help navigating the system?
Yes, and we do try.
Okay.
Now, we don't have all the answers, but we do try to connect individuals with the right ministry, with the right person in the ministry to help work that. We can't overturn decisions, we can't influence the courts or those kind of things, but case files, there's lots of case files for her to work on. She's nearly full-time and just does a huge amount of work. And then I have an office manager who also helps with engagement. She goes to events and can deliver remarks when I'm not there. She takes pictures, like all kinds of things. And in that way, truly, honestly, they do so much work that they actually represent Lethbridge almost as much as I do. They don't go in the chamber, but they help coordinate and channel all of those things to do the best we can. And there's just always so many. I have some colleagues, whether they're in Calgary or whether they're in rural, whether they're in Edmonton, they might get 100 emails a month. Most weeks we're exceeding 150 emails a day, 7 days a week.
That's a lot to process.
It's a lot to process. And if it's form letters, you're likely to get a form letter back. If it's a very specific issue, you're very likely to get a ministerial response back from a ministerial that knows, I don't know that level of detail. Sometimes people ask a million questions in one email. We do our best to hit the highlights of that.
Right.
But we've had to make some conscious decisions just to try to manage the volume. And people sometimes do repeat. We're going to try to do our best to answer your first. Sometimes we'll answer a second, but we've got to move on to other people. And and sometimes if there's vulgar or coarse language or abusive stuff, sorry, we're just filing that. My staff, who does a tremendous amount of work, is not politically affiliated. They should not have to deal with that. So, we just try to serve the community as best we can. But it's a lot of work, a lot of hours.
I mean, again, to your point, if your feet barely touch the ground, you have to have people you can rely on to grind through that and take care of the details and manage that. Yeah.
So they've learned as much or more often than I do on a lot of files. They care about Lethbridge. They care about the people in Lethbridge, and it's almost like triage in a way. And they're going to take those most important files, most urgent files, and move them to the front of the line. And the frivolous things will go to the back of the line, because that's people's concerns matter, and everything is important to everybody, and it is a responsibility we try to manage well. But if somebody's lost their children to different things, or if someone's been a victim of certain type of abuse or criminal activity, we're going to prioritize that, and so on and so forth. And still try to get to all of those questions, however quote unquote minor they may appear.
Right.
But it's a lot of work, and they are very, very dedicated. I can't speak highly enough for them. They do so on, again, limited budgets. I know what our office gets. I know what our local MP's office gets as an allocation from government revenues, and ours is much smaller, but it's also a smaller geographic area. But we try to serve the needs as best we can.
Okay. I mean, I do want to address the elephant in the room. I mean, you've just said your team works very hard at trying to address resident concerns. They're active in the community. They represent the community. Mm-hmm. And yet, this gentleman, Ryan Tanner, has started a recall petition against you. And that's not isolated to just you. There are, I think, there's 26 still left active in the province. But the accusation in his petition is that you don't represent constituent interests, that you don't, perhaps, he's accusing that, he's saying that people don't feel that you're connected to the community. So, I mean, how do you respond to that? Here's a constituent or a group of constituents, presumably, that are standing up and saying, no, actually, you're not doing your job.
Yeah. So I would take exception to me not doing my job. I believe I do the work. Now, I know my riding. So let's start with my riding. Lethbridge, last election, I won with 51.3 or 4% of the vote, which means the other 48 point whatever percent was the opposition. Just about on any issue in Lethbridge-East, you're going to get a 50-50 split. So,
fair enough.
So I have often told people I don't have the privilege of voting 51% for and 49% against any piece of legislation or any decision by government. Either yes or no. And in a party-led democracy under the Westminster style, there are such things as whip votes.
Party discipline is a factor, right?
Party discipline is a factor, and there's on principle or with integrity, you should vote against that and risk losing your seat and sitting across the aisle. I said, well, I look at two former colleagues that sit across the aisle now, and what is their level of advocacy for their communities within the government? They went from the inner circle in cabinet, one of them, with all of those privileges and advantages, to 3 minutes a week in question period. That's the access he has now to government, ministers, premier, whatever. 3 minutes a week. Sometimes you have to take a little watering wine, and sometimes you have to work on that. I absolutely do the job of an MLA, evidenced by 3 new schools, 4 modernizations, water treatment plant funding, Highway 3 paving all through the city this last summer, the new cath lab funding, the medical doctor training program at the U of L, Lethbridge College becoming Lethbridge Polytechnic was something that I worked on for many years. There's a lot of the job that I do for Lethbridge. And then my ministerial role is the job I do on behalf of all Albertans working on that, which is finding reliability and balance again in our electricity system. So I think I do the job, and I do understand the unique characteristics of Lethbridge-East that is very 50-50. And I'm always going to upset somebody. I try to represent caution. I try to represent an alternative viewpoint where I can. I have many of those conversations behind closed doors in cabinet, held by cabinet confidence. I cannot divulge very much of what I share there. I do so in caucus. And yet in the party system, when that decision is made, I may have been outvoted. When you come out in public, just like I had when I was in a construction company, we'd have a board meeting with the owners.
Debate policies back and forth.
And you can have it out, but once a decision is made, I don't betray my bosses when I go to the public. I don't have to like it, but I either work for the company or I get fired. And it's the same here, and some people don't like that. Some people don't agree with that. There, in the first term, we had 63 MLAs and almost a 2-to-1 ratio in the House.
Right.
There were more free votes. They said, yeah, this one, you can vote however you want. This time round, we have 48. Well, now 46.
Out of 87.
Out of 87.
Right,
so it's pretty tight margins.
Okay.
There is not that freedom. This is, if you don't like it, like, tell us now, and you can go sit over there, or you're voting for this. So far, that trade-off, I don't believe would be beneficial to Lethbridge. Lethbridge has a significant fight to get its share of funding on a lot of different topics, because we only have one representative voice. And as the third largest city in Alberta, I think we actually need more voices to represent Lethbridge and area and its interests, because we are a hub in the south. We are no longer a spoke. People come to Lethbridge for healthcare. People come to Lethbridge for jobs, manufacturing. People come to Lethbridge for schooling and post-secondary schooling. They come to Lethbridge, and we need to see that reflected in a lot more funding. We've done very well. I'm very proud of the government. I'm very proud of the advocacy. But some of those hours spent, if I had a co-partner or 2 or 3 or whatever the case may be, to help make sure that we look at this area for all of its potential, I think that would benefit Alberta as we have such a strong agricultural base. There's so much potential to grow. Our manufacturing is growing at an exceptional rate. We could grow that even further.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of work, but back to your original point, I think I'm doing the job.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, and obviously, it's perhaps a limited number of voices out there that are suggesting maybe you aren't, and so I think it's important that people hear your side in terms of what you believe you've contributed, the accomplishments that you're proud of. I mean, I do want to circle back just for a second, though. There's been some speculation that this gentleman, Tanner, is allegedly a UCP supporter. Allegedly, there's been some accusations that somehow you're involved. He's been accused of, making this a strategic move to block other petitions. Like, what do you make of all of this chatter that's gone on around this topic?
I do not know him. I am not involved in my own recall, and
okay.
I can't speculate as to his motivations. I have literally, since the very beginning, I have set it all aside because I have no control over any of it, and said the best thing I can do for Lethbridge is carry on doing the work that I am elected to do. Whatever happens, happens. And I've literally tried to just ignore it from day one.
Okay. So what would you say to voters that are out there contemplating, perhaps they've been asked to sign the petition, they've been asked to judge your performance? Like, what's your message to voters that are being presented with this petition? Like, what would you say to them?
Well, I support their democratic right, and we, as a government, brought in recall, and
ironically, created the opportunity. Yeah.
So it was a campaign promise in 2019, and we delivered on that promise. Over time, my personal thoughts have evolved to it.
Okay.
And I actually think that elections should mean something. So we'll see where we go in the future, but I think we've seen that this recall is not working as intended. I think it does need adjustment, whether we adjust it, amend it, or get rid of it altogether. I think this speaks to, hey, if you really care about who represents you, and come out and vote on election day. It's one of the reasons I got involved in the first place. Is things happened in 2015 that I think took a lot of people by surprise. I worked in construction. All I heard was a ton of complaints about the new government. I asked them, did you vote? And many people didn't. I said, well, then stop complaining. And two is, I didn't want to complain. I said, you know what? I am going to put up or shut up. I'm going to get involved. So in 2019, I got involved. I quit my job and went through the process, ended up getting nominated, ended up getting elected. And now I am trying to serve communities by doing the best I can, recognizing that every individual is unique, every situation is unique. I think governments in general get in trouble when they do too broad brush a general average approach. I think there needs to be consideration for nuance. Lethbridge is different than Red Deer, and we're different than Calgary or Edmonton. Similarities exist, but one size fits all rarely works well, and I continue to try to work on that. So that's kind of what I say there.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I mean, let's shift gears forward a little bit, and we think about what else is going on. You've been actively involved in exploring nuclear as a strategy for Alberta, and I know that freaks a lot of people out just to hear the N word.
Yes.
There's been some province-wide engagement sessions. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the back, like where does this interest in nuclear come from? What's this engagement process all about?
So way back in 2019, when I was a private member, I had a member on my board and a member on Lethbridge-West board who both have a very strong nuclear background. They worked as nuclear engineers across Canada for many years. They live in Lethbridge. Strong advocates for nuclear. I was very, very proud in that first term, and maybe even still for a while. I've spoken more about nuclear in the chamber than any other member. And I'm very proud of that. It's very exciting technology. I've had the chance to learn that nuclear has been part of Canada's history for over 60 years. We are one of 5 nations that have nuclear technology generating electricity. Very proud of that.
We actually export it around the world.
We can export it, well, not so much around the world, but definitely in North America, we do. And as I've gone to Ontario and talked to New Brunswick and followed their path and their journey with our counterpart in Saskatchewan, I've learned so much about it. So one of the great topics in our current political age is climate change. Wherever you believe on that spectrum. Okay, let's just set that aside. Don't need to get into ideology, but climate change is a major issue. Nuclear reactors and electricity generation is non-emitting, zero, no carbon emissions. And it's a lot of power. Very, very, very consistent, reliable power. And the technology we have in Canada, our own technology, not somewhere else, literally has so many fail-safes, it cannot overheat and blow up like we've seen in other jurisdictions around the world. That, for very good reasons, does concern many.
Everyone has the Chernobyl documentary burned into their brain.
Fukushima, right? Whatever, for sure, as they should. Canadian technology does not work in that way. The fail-safes are triple redundant that it can't do that. And then so you take that, for the future, it is sustainable and it is reliable. Cost is still an issue. It is markedly higher than other forms of generation, but as a part of the mix, it adds elements that we want, and it is very, very long lasting. So I'm really excited about that. And then if you consider some of the new medical initiatives out of that, creating medical isotopes by putting particles in the nuclear reactor, having that nuclear reaction change it into a different isotope that they can use to treat cancer, that they can use to sterilize medical equipment, that they can use to make radical breakthroughs. Some of those isotopes treat stage 4 prostate cancer with a higher than 90% success rate. And Ontario right now creates 70% of the global usage of that medical isotope. Wow. Wouldn't it be awesome if we, through private investment, not public, private investment in Alberta, had a nuclear reactor creating medical isotopes to treat prostate cancer and other types of cancer, cure cancer through medical isotopes? I think it's just a huge potential opportunity that we want to talk to Albertans about the pros, the cons, the negatives, the concerns. What do you do with nuclear waste?
Because there are some legitimate concerns about waste storage and
exactly. We have to answer these things before we even start, and that's the engagement that we're on. My parliamentary secretary Chantal DeYoung is doing a tremendous job leading that engagement. She's going all around Alberta, talking to First Nations, talking to Albertans all across the spectrum to talk to them about it. We have a former NDP MLA from Alberta and Cabinet Minister Darren Billis joining that. This is non-partisan. This is a group effort to listen to Albertans, to get their true things, to answer the question, or prove to them that we can before we do anything with it. But I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, because we have to build an entire regulatory framework. I mean, there's so much work to be done.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, I would love to hear that feedback come back positively. It is somewhat already. And if I was able to have that as a part of my legacy as an elected official, be the one who started nuclear power generation in Alberta, I would be very proud of that. And maybe we'll see what we hear back from Albertans. There might still be a little bit of reticence, but 15 years ago was the last time we had this conversation. It didn't get over the hump at that time, but a lot of things have changed in the last 15 years, and climate change is one of those very attractive attributes to nuclear generation that can help us.
And there's as you pointed out, you've been in Ontario and New Brunswick, there's a pretty robust nuclear industry already in this country that's been operating for many decades that we can learn from.
Very much so. And our partnership with Saskatchewan, where they have a lot of uranium, our partnership with the UK, it expands those trade relationships in ways that we're not as dependent on the United States. And getting that balance is actually very healthy for our economy, very healthy for our country. And I think it's a very exciting potential.
Okay. I mean, I think the average Albertan understands that there's increasing power demand from data centers and streaming services. We're a very power hungry society, but I don't think, people are going, well, why nuclear? Why now? It's all about base load, and it's all about trying to satiate this demand. I get the impression sometimes looking at ISO reports, the Alberta Electrical System Operator, that we're sometimes busting at the seams to sort of keep up with the demand for power. Is that why nuclear is such a focus?
It is, because they come in big blocks, right? A typical turbine for conventional nuclear is a nominal 1,000 megawatts, just one. And if you're going to build one to make it economic, you need to build like 4 of them. So that's where Ontario is typically built in 4,000 megawatt chunks. Like, that's big. When you consider Alberta's daily average use of electricity is 10,500 megawatts.
So one block is almost half. Like that's a big whack.
That's
of
a
power.
big whack. So that's why it may not be conventional, because that might be too big to just swallow all at once. It might be small modular reactors, SMRs, where they start at the 300 megawatt size, and a smaller price tag, more easily integrated into our system. The other thing is, and the oil sands in Alberta are very, very excited to look at SMR technology. You could put an SMR on one of our oil sands projects, and we would almost be net neutral, non-emitting overnight. Because right now they use natural gas. They use the gas as the byproduct, burn that to create electricity. There's the carbon emissions. They switch that over to an SMR, no emissions, all the heat that they need for their other processes, and that natural gas that's the byproduct now, instead of burning it, they they process it, and then they sell it.
Yeah, carbon fiber products or other resins.
All kinds of great stuff. So can you imagine, because really our largest emitting industry is our oil sands. We know that. It's the constant tension with us and the federal government, all of those kind of things. Put an SMR in there, and that site becomes zero emission. So Alberta's oil would be zero emitting. The cleanest environmental in the world. I think that's something to consider. So yeah, there's some options for us.
Okay. Now there's also, in this region, renewables are certainly important, right? There are lots of wind and solar deployed in this region. Again, for folks that are watching from outside of Canada, Southern Alberta in particular has the highest potentials for wind and solar in the country. This is, I have a colleague that refers to this as the oil sands of renewables down here. So it's like, that's an interesting twist.
Yeah.
I think there's critics out there that would say, though, your pause on renewables, the subsequent regulation changes really put a chill on investment in renewables, and that projects are going to be canceled and that perhaps Alberta has lost its luster around renewables. What do you say to those critics? I mean, you were the guy that said, hold on, we got to do something different here.
So I would say that they're not looking at all the facts.
Okay.
Over the last 3 years, Alberta has led with renewable projects, led Canada with renewable projects by having nearly 90% of all renewable projects in all of Canada
are here,
built in Alberta.
Okay.
Over those 3 years, including the year that we had to pause. The 2 years that we had to pause because it's straddled a year end. But so we still built a lot. And again, keeping in mind that we use about 10,500 megawatts of electrons every day, we built over those 3 years nearly 7,000 megawatts of wind and solar. So we now have over 8,000 megawatts of generating capacity with wind and solar.
In a perfect world, if everyone was like, that's what you could.
That's what we could generate.
Okay.
Now what happens? It's not consistent. I'm not trying to knock renewables. They have their place. They are great. They have certain attributes we have to manage. They're intermittent, so it comes and goes. So that's one thing. Two is when you have that amount of surplus energy generation capacity in Alberta, we are now, for the first time in over a decade, we're a surplus generator, so we export more than we import. Keep that in mind for some later conversations about our relationship with Montana and the intertime. But we got a lot more than we can use every single day. And so any market of anything, is that where you're going to go? Or are you going to go where they don't have enough? Right?
Fair enough.
So we're trying to get that balance.
Okay.
So that's one factor. Two is look at your bill. All your watchers, look at your utility bill. Like really take it down. Go past the first page, which is just a summary. Go to the next page on the breakdown of your bill. Generation should not and likely is not the highest portion of that cost. What is transmission.
Yeah, all of the other lines of
all the
things.
other lines. Well,
Okay.
It's the connecting of, you got your generator here and you got your house here. The lines to take it there is greatly transmission, and the last little bit in your city or town is your distribution. But your transmission's a big cost. Now, we had the big build of transmission way back in early 2000s. That was a government decision, and we built that system. That system now is fully utilized. But that's not when we saw the bills go up. Now, that's a capital plan, and it's a really, really big bill that gets amortized over 50, 60 years, and that's on your bill.
But those utilities have to recover that expense somewhere.
They do. So that's going to be on there for 50, 60 years. Even if it started 20 years ago or over 20 years ago, it's still going to be on your bill for another 40 years. Every new site, we went from roughly 15 coal sites in the province to now we have over 250 unique footprint sites of generation in the province. 15 to 250. That's why we have a very, very low cost of generation right now. Last 2 years, we've averaged between 2 and 3 cents, even though your contract bill is likely 7 or 8 cents. If you're higher than that, please go talk to somebody. You can get a better rate. But your transmission bill, portion of your bill, is likely 65% of the bill, because that number has just been layered on and layered on and layered on.
As we built all of these other assets, you've had to.
And the old rules were, when we got off coal, which we all pay for as well, by the way, almost $2 billion, $100 million a year till 2030. Every new line, when they have to do the transmission upgrade to connect to our system, all of those costs until last year, ratepayer pays 100% of that. So one of the rules we changed was that, no, now we're going to go to cost causation. If it's population growth, fine. You as a ratepayer's population should pay for that.
We're driving that.
Yeah,
Okay.
You're building. You want to live in a house, you want power to that house, you pay the parts to get that there. Industrial commercial growth. Yep. Industry, if you're going to build a big plant and take a lot of power, the transmission required to get that energy, you're going to pay for that. But if you're here just saying, listen, I want to build renewables, I want to build any kind of generation, I'd like to build there, low cost land, low cost access to whatever, low cost, and everybody else can pay for the transmission. Sure, I'm going to build there, and I'm going to make bank. No, if you're just going to make bank, ratepayers aren't going to pay for your profits. Ratepayers are going to pay for what they need. If they don't need that generation, you can still build it. We are a free market. We're open. You can still build it, but you bear the cost of that transmission because you're the one getting the benefit from that.
Okay, so if I cause the requirement, then I'm on the hook.
Cost causation.
Okay.
So if you cause it, so who's getting the benefit? If, like I said, you're building a new community, a population growth, they're getting the benefit of electricity, they should pay for that. But if it's just a developer wanting to try and make money on generation to sell to whomever, fine, please do that, but why should Trevor Lewington pay for your transmission costs, which aren't insignificant? There was one project proposed in Medicine Hat that the transmission connection was $300 million.
Just for the connection.
Just for the connection. And they were complaining because my new rules stopped them from developing that. Okay, if I just let it go, who's paying that $300 million? The ratepayers of Alberta. What benefit are the ratepayers of Alberta getting from that? Nothing. So I'm here, these rules are set in place to protect Alberta ratepayers. Hey, you pay your fair share. If you're going to use it and get benefit, you should pay. That's the rule. But if you're just coming to make a buck off Albertans, well, I think Albertans need a little protection. So it's a sliding scale. It's not absolute. There were easier options. It was 100% ratepayer. They said, well, why don't we make it 100% load? Or 50-50. I said, like, that's too simplistic. Remember I was talking earlier about the average, the non-nuanced, one-size-fits-all? I said I didn't want that. So we went to a cost causation to allow our regulators to say, what are you doing? Are you providing, we're going to provide 30% is going to go to the city for their growth, 30% is going to go to that industry, and 30% we're just going to pay the market. Well, okay, these guys are going to pay 60% of that transmission cost, but you pay the other 40. Right? Like, it's fair, and it's nuanced, and it fits.
Almost case by case, depending on the project.
Case by case, depending on the project. And we think that's the most fair. It's meant to be locational signal. So now where you build does matter. If you can move 3 kilometers closer and your transmission cost goes from 300 million down to 50 million, and all you needed was a little incentive to make that decision, we all benefit. The developer still builds. We still get electricity. The cost to everybody is less. That's an economically viable project. So that's the intent, and we're going to see that. So like I said, lots of factors in there, and protecting the ratepayer is a very high priority in my ministry, and I'm very proud of that.
I guess that's the affordability part of it, affordability and utilities, right? It's
Exactly.
balancing those two.
And now people won't see the bills come down, but I would say in my time in this chair, we probably saved $3 to $5 billion of transmission costs not being just applied to their bill with no say whatsoever. So there will be some of those costs, but again, flattening that out, stretching it over time, making sure they're not seeing continual rise.
Right.
We've adjusted fees, we've adjusted transmission rates, we're looking at distribution rates. We've seen the generation rates come down. We are very hopeful that there will be some other users coming onto the system within Alberta who are going to pay their share of the transmission costs, which will in fact lower everybody's costs. And I'm excited about that announcement when that comes about, hopefully soon.
Okay, well, we'll be watching. So renewables are welcome. There's not a ban. Like, if you can justify there's a business case, Alberta's still open for development.
Absolutely, and right now things are shifting within our market because we want a balanced market. It's all of the above approach. We're seeing a lot of small peaker plants utilizing different aspects of our grid, taking advantage of our very, very low natural gas cost to help balance out those peakers. We're seeing some...
Because peakers address sudden spikes in demand
ups and downs,
here and
right?
there. Okay.
And it's a really great combination for renewables in their ups and downs. We are seeing some industry like Bitcoin mining, those kind of things come and say, what if we located right on the site with a wind or solar developer? Because we can go up and down within the generation. We're like, that solves a lot of problems. One, no transmission costs. Two is it solves their congestion costs when there's too much electrons to go on a wire because everybody's at peak. And then the operator says, yeah, you can't sell. Everybody's
you're constraining everybody.
You're constraining everybody because we just have too much. We can't handle it. You just can't drive a 10-ton truck on a 5-ton bridge, so I like to say. So they're going to co-locate. That would help them, and they can get these offtake agreements. So, and what we're seeing is a huge interest in battery storage to say, oh, these intermittent guys, when they can sell to the grid, great. When they're curtailed, they can sell to us. We can charge our batteries up, and then when it stops being windy or the sun goes out, then we can sell and get a higher price. Like, we're seeing that collaboration, which is exactly what we want. We want a well-balanced, all of the above grid, that it's not everything is wind, everything is solar, everything is solar. No, we've got a great mix across the whole spectrum, and it makes us more efficient. It brings costs down, and it allows us to attract more industry because we've got low-cost, reliable electricity, or we can export to other markets. So we think we are seeing the response being what we wanted it to be, is Yeah, right now, this season, probably not a huge amount of new renewables being built because we had such a huge explosion of them. But we're going to see a big explosion in batteries, and we're going to see some further development in peakers to make what we've got even more efficient. And that's going to attract load, which is business, to come and use that. So we're seeing all of the above.
Okay. And that's an explosion in the number, not the explosion of batteries.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't want that.
We don't want that, no.
Okay. You mentioned coal from a thermal perspective, which Alberta moved away from, but the other form of coal gets an awful lot of attention down here, and we're talking about metallurgical coal for making steel. So I know in this region, you know, the potential of additional mining on the eastern slopes of the Rockies comes up. There's been a lot of public discussion and debate. I guess you're the minister who has some bearing on some of those policies, but you're also the guy that represents a constituency that has a vested interest in water quality and has concerns. So what are your thoughts on the conversations around metallurgical coal and that mining kind of question?
So I've had to be very careful with this, very thoughtful as I've thought through this, and I've always taken the position that responsible natural resource development, it should be pursued, and we cannot put other industries at risk for one like coal. So if we can balance those tensions, then we can support it. And water quality, water safety, water protection is utmost priority in that. So far, what we've seen in this whole evolution of all of these kind of things, we've seen a lot of settlements because coal rights are different than oil and gas. Oil and gas rights as a natural resource are owned by the Crown, and that's why they're handled differently. Coal rights, way back in history when Canada first built the railroads, the governments of the day, both provincial and federal, gave that mineral right to the railroad company so they could mine coal to feed their locomotives. Those mineral rights have been bought and sold privately for decades and decades. So it's a little different. So whether everybody wants to hear it or not, the history is true. In 2015, there's a letter from the NDP government inviting more coal exploration companies to Alberta to look at this exploration. And when they did so, they bought those mineral rights.
Okay.
And as you know, things went from one way to the other and all these kind of things, and we ended up putting a moratorium saying, no, we're going to stop that development. Those private companies now restricted access to their privately owned mineral rights, had no other recourse than to sue. So they sued the government of Alberta. We don't want to have to go through court and do this, resolve all those issues. Very expensive, very time consuming, a burden to the taxpayer. We removed that moratorium so that we could negotiate with those companies privately to end these claims. And we have done so in a number of fronts. Still big numbers, but fractions of what the claim before the courts was. And those settlements mean that they will not pursue their mineral rights to mine them or explore those.
They're basically abandoning their rights.
They're abandoning them
claims. Okay.
for saying for the cost that they put in to do the development, they're taking a payout and walking away from that. No coal mining in those areas. And then only a few will be left. And those ones, we have increased the environmental protections, particularly around water. Some of the highest standards in the world, the most monitoring in the world. And if they should proceed, very few of them, the levels and the infractions are very, very strong, very, very tight, that either they won't proceed to begin with or they proceed and live within those limits. So again, emphasis on the word responsible development so that we can get the steel that we need to build our buildings and our hospitals and our schools and all of those kind of things, and try to get through this whole litigated mess that's got a long history. And we're starting to see some resolution to that.
Yeah, you know, because selfishly, Lethbridge County, who I represent, is at the heart of Canada's premier food corridor. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry critical to this region, and people rightly so, I think, worry about any level of contamination to water and groundwater and things like that, right?
For sure. And it is interesting. The natural state of water is not pure water. You're not actually allowed to release pure water into it. Has to mimic, if that's an acceptable word, the water that's already there naturally. there's selenium in there. And in fact, there's not even enough selenium in the water currently to water livestock. A lot of livestock producers in southern Alberta have to add selenium to their feed to get it up to the level that you need. Now, there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of disagreement on all of that stuff. It all amounts.
I'm not going to check my phone because it's already probably blowing up on online. But
it's all about what is the limits and how do you stay. And but naturally it is not zero. Okay. And even for a body, it's not zero. But the difference between acceptable limits and toxic limits, there's again, to your viewership and everything, that is the argument's all about that. So I am definitely on under very stringent allowable limits, no change to protect all the other industries. And if they can sustain that and meet that, great. And if they can't, well, then I don't think you should start.
Okay. No, thanks for that. You've spent a fair bit of time in the U.S. working with other governments, and even before you were minister, I think you were Council of State Governments or something like that. So you've had lots of long-term relationships. Obviously, that's been in the news pretty much the entire last year, but more so this week.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on Alberta's relationship with Montana in particular, but other U.S. states? What is your government trying to do, recognizing that trade and things are federal, but the province has a relationship and a role to play?
For sure. I think it's very healthy for all of us to travel and get perspectives besides our own, because we can all get very used to, if we talk all the time, eventually we start thinking like and talking like. So to get their perspective is helpful. And now at a subnational level in the U.S., we get strong agreement. Our trade relationship with many states, Montana included, is extremely strong. Many of those states, their single largest trade partner in the world is Alberta. So why would they want to threaten that or tariff that or make it harder? That doesn't help them. It doesn't help us. Now, at a national level, obviously different objectives. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what the objective really is. It can change minute to minute, day by day. But the message we try to get across, the message I try to get across, is that in the United States or individual states' best interest is actually a strong Canada. If you have a weak democracy, a weak economy, who do you think is going to come in and buy that debt or infiltrate that democracy?
Or take advantage of
right. All of those kind of things. I love the football analogy. Like, you don't want a weak guard for your quarterback. The blind side, right?
Yeah.
This analogy is true. The first payment most important is a mortgage, but the second most is the insurance. Canada can be huge insurance for the United States. If Canada is strong, if Canada is strong economically, then we're strong militarily. Then we're strong societally. Those are strengths that will benefit the United States, and that message is very widely received. Obviously, trade negotiations are always on that. Who's got protections? We've got to work on that. Certainly we do. We've got our flaws and our weak spots as Canadians, as Albertans, for sure. Talking about them fairly, talking about them respectfully, has served Alberta very, very well. I was just getting some documentation today from Canada West Foundation and some of their great work. And Alberta has one of the largest economic trade partnerships with the United States, and we have some of the most minimal impact from tariffs. We still have some significant tariffs on our lumber industries and dairy and some of those areas highly affected. But by and large, we're 3.5% impact on our economy, and we'd love to get rid of that.
Right.
And we think that diplomacy is a very key part to that. Always difficult to punch somebody in the face and then ask for a better deal. So I think we're trying to work on those relationships and tell our story, share the mutual benefits. We think there's win-win.
Okay. I mean, I noticed we're almost out of time. It's hard for me to believe an hour has flown by.
Yeah,
so I appreciate your time spending that with me. As we wrap up here, I guess I'm curious, bringing it back down to the local level and that core role of your job as the local elected representative here. Yeah. What are your priorities for Lethbridge? What do you see as kind of the big things you're working on or worried about? You know, what's the focus kind of here in town?
There's three main topics, but there's lots that I'm working on. A lot around critical infrastructure. So St. Francis and LCI schools, middle school and high school, they need some modernization. Really working on that. There's some great collaborative work there. The school divisions do a tremendous amount of work. Really good people volunteering their time, making great efforts for their kids, for all of our kids. So working on that, working on the cath lab to make sure that project continues to go. Again, just some of the individuals involved in that, our cardiologists and doctors and nurses that work on that to make lives better.
It could be transformational for cardiac patients in our region.
Incredible, right? And I think help the system as a whole. The amount of patients that get transferred back and forth between Lethbridge and Calgary.
A lot of resources.
A lot. So to make us a stronger hub. And then again, critical infrastructure in terms of our water, wastewater, so that we as an entire region can grow. I heard from the mayor this morning that there are some days where we're operating at nearly 100% capacity. Well, we want to grow. There's a lot of economic development that can happen. Water treatment.
That makes me happy to hear.
Yeah, virtually net neutral. So we can grow. It can be a win-win. We've seen a tremendous amount of investment from the province already. A lot more to go. Continue to work with the federal government for that, because I think that's a core mandate of all levels of government, to make sure that we have water and wastewater treatment, and it helps keeps us healthy, keeps us safe, helps us grow economically, strengthens all the rest of that. So those are some really primary upfront ideas that I'm working on as a local MLA. Lots more beyond that.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, as an economic developer at heart, I'm obviously very concerned about workforce and future talent, and you know, schools that are busting at the seams are important to make sure we've got modern facilities and access to technology. Yeah. And obviously water and wastewater is the lifeblood of most industries in this region, and it's the only way our region grows and continues to be more successful. So
exactly. And when we do it in collaboration, we do better. I do like that phrase. Lots of people are better together. All the towns and communities around Lethbridge, we can be vibrant and we can both win. Coaldale, most of all, as they're the closest, largest, but Colehurst, Raymond, Tabor, Picture Butte, so many great communities, so much collaboration, so much work in and out of the city, that when we get strong, when we work together, it is truly the Team Lethbridge spirit. And Lethbridge County, the city of Lethbridge, we can do it, and we can do a lot of really great stuff. I just want to continue to elevate Lethbridge. Make sure we have a louder voice, a bigger part of the picture. Sometimes when you sit in Edmonton, they think the map stops at Calgary. It doesn't. It keeps going right down here to Lethbridge and all the way down to Milk River and Coots and all those great communities down there. A lot of terrific people doing a lot of great work.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Appreciate your time this evening. That is our show for tonight, folks. Appreciate Nathan Neudorf, Alberta's Minister of Affordability and Utilities, and more importantly for us here in town, the MLA for Lethbridge-East, for joining me tonight. We'll see you next month, and we'll begin speaking to other community and business leaders to help you build your business, help you build your community, and help you build your life. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great evening.